XL diving is the technique that I use when I'm spearfishing. Now, very few people use this technique. I only know of one other, and I'm not sure if he's as serious about it as I am. I've been using XL diving for more than 15 years, and to many people it may be a surprise because they wouldn't know unless they actually paid really close attention to what I'm doing. I've been XL diving for more than 15 years. I started out inhale, but after a couple of mates blacked out and I had a samba, I started investigating around about other ways to dive, and it just piqued my interest that there was a free diving course at the time being run by Sebastian Murat, who was a well-known free diver at the time who was practicing quite a lot of XL diving. So I got onto that, and from that I just developed and kept with it, and I've been doing it ever since. So what is XL diving? Well, from a technical perspective, it originally was called FRC diving and now it's FRV diving. That's functional residual capacity or functional residual volume. So it's not a full exhale. And the reason it's not a full exhale is a full exhale is really uncomfortable, and you don't want to be uncomfortable, but it's also you need some air to be able to do gas exchange with the middle air, the eustachian tube, and in the sinuses into the mask. Now, without that, you would have pressure problems in both parts of the head there. So what I do is I exhale about 40 to 60% of my air, and then as I descend down, I don't need to kick as much. I really don't. I wear less weight, but I don't have that buoyancy. I've let go of half of it, so it's quite easy for me to descend. I don't need to start frantically thrashing to kick, which a lot of people in inhale do. They kick really hard. And the thigh muscles in the human body are the largest muscle. So once you kick hard at the start of a dive, you turn on that muscle, and it will very much burn a lot of oxygen throughout the entire dive. You will struggle to turn that tap off. Once it's turned on, it stays on for most of the dive. Now, as I descend, I need to do a mouthful. I don't do a pinch and blow, a Valsalva. I just open my airways. So I do a mouthful because I need to get air into my mouth because I don't have that option. So I actually do a mouthful, and then as I get down to about 15 meters, that's when I do it, and then I will keep just letting air into my eustachian tube in the middle air and into my mask where needed as I go down. Now I spend about the same amount of time on the bottom as I did on inhale, and then when I come up, I'm carrying a lot less weight. So I don't have too much trouble getting off the bottom. It's quite easy for me. Now, as I come up to the surface, I have much less risk of the shallow water blackout because I don't get that expansion of the lungs. That people get that expansion, they're low on oxygen, and then the lungs all of a sudden, at that part of the dive, decide, I'm going to steal all the oxygen you have, and your brain's not going to get it, and you're going to black out. That doesn't happen for me because I don't get that re-expansion. My descent is a little bit slower because I don't get that re-expansion, so I don't get that acceleration in the last few meters, but I don't need it. I have a clear head. I never have a foggy head as I come up, and I'm always fine. I've never had any problems once I conditioned over. So I love the dive. I love the way XL diving feels. It feels less like you're attacking the dive, much more like you're actually just giving in to the ocean. So I just exhale and sink, and it's just a beautiful feeling. I really love it. When I compare it to my early days when I was a young man inhale diving, it was all about attack. It was all about offense and aggression, and I would kick down hard, power down. It was all about fighting that buoyancy, fighting the ocean. Now I just give in and let it take me, and I love it. So why do it? Why exhale? Well, as I briefly touched on it, you have a better feeling when you're diving. Once you get over that initial conditioning, and it's hard, the initial conditioning took me about a year to really adapt to the lung pressure that when you do a 20 meter exhale dive, it feels like 50, 60 meters in terms of your pressure on your lungs. Like, it's incredible. But once you condition, the lungs can go way down. People have been down past 200 meters. So the lungs can do amazing things. They just need time to adjust. And you'll be able to do that if you just take it slow, work your way down. The other benefits are you have less fatigue throughout the day. So I'm carrying less weight around my waist the entire day. So if I have a long day, yeah, it really pays dividends for that. So I got less pressure on my back, less weight I'm carrying around all day. I have less, or have zero CO2 headaches. A lot of the divers that I've dived with, they do a lot of frequent dives throughout a long day trip. They get towards the end of the day get a CO2 headache. That is where they're building up so much CO2 that it basically gives them a headache, which they take Panadol for later in the day. Because you're exhaling, you're not producing a lot of that CO2. It's not in you when you have that dive because you haven't taken oxygen down to convert. So you get less of that as well. And then some of the other benefits, the softer benefits that come from exhale diving, like the mammalian dive response, your heart rate drops faster earlier in the dive. And really, just being part of the ocean and just giving into it, it's a philosophical change where you give in and let it take you and just let it fall. There's a lot more falling on exhale diving, a lot less kicking. Even coming up's a lot easier. But yeah, particularly that descent, you really just let go and let it take you. You might do a slight feather kick. I use my one hand has a gun, the other one I just pull with my hand. I don't want to use my thighs because they are the largest muscle, as I mentioned, and to burn from your largest muscles is not ideal when you've got low reserves. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits. It's hard to sell because people look at it and go, "You're crazy. Why would you give up half your air to dive down?" Well, the first thing to understand is even on a full inhale, only 1/3 of your oxygen is in your lungs. 2/3 of it is in your blood. So just remember that. The oxygen is already in your blood. The oxygen in your lungs, the air, I should say, is only part of it is oxygen. The rest of it is a problem. It becomes a problem throughout the dive, at the end and throughout because of the issue of buoyancy. So it's something to consider. One way to consider the buoyancy, let's for argument's sake that these two floats represent the buoyancy of an inhale dive. When I get rid of half of my air, this is gone. So I only have to deal with that to get down. That's why I can do less kicking, and really when I just descend, it's a lot less energy burn because of that less kicking. So I'm burning less energy. So that's the key point. On an inhale dive, people burn a lot more energy. So if you say you start out with more oxygen, it doesn't matter. You're burning it. You're burning it from the start of the dive. You're turning on those muscles, those big muscles in your thighs, which burn energy the entire dive. And then when you're coming up, you're bringing a heavy weight belt, which I'm not. So you're burning a lot of energy at the bottom of the return, which I kick off the bottom quite easily. So I've got no problems there. And sure, when you get to the top of inhale dive, you will get that acceleration from your expanding lungs and repressurization. But I would argue the dive's over then anyway. There are some other things I do in shallow water as well. I actually will do a full exhale in shallow water to get down, like I'm talking really shallow. People say, oh, you got to load up your weight belt if you're diving shallow water. Nah, not true. You can just get rid of all that air, get down, no problem. And then you'll be able to lie, even when I do my pool training, if I'm on a metre of water, most people would float back up. No, I can just lie on the bottom, no problem, nice and relaxed. So everything you're told sometimes there's a different angle that you can take and the world kind of flips around. So I would say, and I needed this too when I first began my journey into exhale diving, is just have an open mind. If you're considering want to dabble with it, and there's basically not very many courses out there, so you're going to have to do it on your own. I would say just have an open mind. You need to be cognizant that not everything is black and white in terms of I need air to be able to dive. It's not true. You can actually do a dive, and they've done tests on this in the freediving clinics, and the clinic that I went to, the inhale dives that we did an exhale dive straight after, it was the same length of time. So how would you get into exhale diving? Well, there won't be any courses around. It's very unlikely you find a course that'll do it. Sebastian Murat moved over to Sweden, I believe, so he's not around here. And the main thing when you're looking to get into it is to change your mindset. You're probably thinking, I need air, I need oxygen in order to dive longer. That's a small mindset, I think. There's no other way to describe it. The actual thing to consider is everything is about burn. So if you take a lot of oxygen, you've got to expend a lot of energy to get that buoyancy down. You've got to expend a lot of energy to get that weight belt off the ground. So that's the sort of thing you need to start considering. Think what you've been told throughout your whole dive career may not necessarily be 100% accurate. That's all I'll say on that. There is more to the world than what everybody thinks sometimes. So consider all that. Have an open mind. When we did the freediving course with the friends that I went with, our inhale dives, we started out doing inhale dives like we normally would. Then we did exhale dives, and they were the same length of time, same distance as well. So nothing is what it seems. Have an open mind. You need that because you're doing the opposite of what you've done before. And take time, do it slowly. You will feel incredible pressure in your lungs when you actually go and start doing this, because, as I said, it's like going much deeper for your lungs because they will compress a lot faster. So you need to consider that. But if you take it slow, your lungs will adapt and you'll start to feel the real beautiful nature of just an exhale dive, where you just give in to the ocean and let it take you. There's no aggression, there's no fight. You just give in. I really love it. As I said, I was an inhale diver, now I'm an exhale diver. I never inhale when I dive. I've had no problems since I've exhaled. Once I got past the adjustment phase, which took almost a year probably it got a lot easier towards the end of the first year, but yeah, initially there was real a weird feeling. It's the only way I can describe it. It's when you're used to inhale diving, you feel like, oof, when you go down to 20 metres on an exhale, it feels completely different. But you adapt and then you move on and then it feels normal again. Yeah, I would recommend it. I think it's an option for a lot of people, especially if you're curious and yeah, you want to look at other options. Have a look.